Sustainability Australia with Graz van Egmond.
Welcome. I'm Graz van Egmond, and welcome to episode 2 of our discussion with Blocktex and Elk. Adrian is here to join me again, and so is Mandy. Adrian, in regards to raising funds and investments in Australia, are we becoming too risk averse, for investors? Is it, too many box tickings, and are we being restrained by too many parameters and rather than just going, the old Australian way of just go for it,
I think that's probably a sector-specific answer. I think if you want to raise money at the moment, just say it's to do with AI. And 60% of funds in the last sort of quarter or half have moved into AI ventures. Now, most of those will fail, but it's just like mention the word AI, so I think we have to be careful that it's finding backers for industries that we think are sunset industries. So we mention manufacturing, we think of Holden cars. We mention manufacturing, we think of shipbuilding. We mention manufacturing, we think of coal mining. But it's not. It's actually the guys in Brisbane who are building rockets. It's actually it's people like Blocktex who are building really cutting edge technology and inventing all of our own machines to do this. There's a lot of these great examples of companies in Australia, but they just find funding significantly harder because people lump us all in this rather sort of dour, oh well, that's a declining industry sector, and it's not. And there's so many smart engineering students at Australian universities who are being sucked up by the mines and by the extractive industries. And they themselves are going into an industry with a sunset clause because, we're trying to decarbonise, for Christ's sake.
Exactly. Have you heard the latest? Why are you going into that? Adrian, just one of the key things that I think a lot of companies, we talk about, and I'm a great believer in marketing and showing your sustainability advantage and differentiation, but the issue of greenwashing, which is also, it's a problem, but also it stops companies from talking about what they're doing. So it's a two-edged sword. But it does become a major issue in Australia. I know ACCC has recently stepped up their investigations. They've released new guidelines, but we're still finding misleading sustainability stories out there. And I was just talking to a sustainability director the other night, and she was saying, I have to keep on running into corporate affairs saying, no, you can't say this and you can't say that, just stop it. It's that over-promising and that misinformation, so to speak. So do you think that ACCC is going far enough? And how do you think we can control this? Because it is having a negative effect.
I think it's very important that the consumer of any product knows exactly what they're getting and they feel confident in purchasing it. And I think the ACCC have a significantly important role, and I hope increasingly important role in that space of stamping down on quite egregious claims about what people are saying that their products or their services can do. I think it isn't just it isn't just in marketing, it's in making sure that that if a brand claims it is recycling, well, we need to have a definition that we agree on what is recycling. Are you actually converting a product from A to B, or are you simply just stirring the pot and hoping that people just know? If you're exporting textiles to somewhere else, but you don't quite know where, how is that recycling as opposed to just problem avoidance? And I think that we attend many fairs, primarily equipment fairs, manufacturing fairs, and every stand now has got a green tinge to it. Every stand has got, we're a green washing company, we're a green this company, we're a green that company, but it's the same machine that was last year. And so it's like, okay, so what's changed? Have you just what have you done differently that's made
that
your
label on.
that's allowed you to earn that label? And so I do think that the ACCC needs to make an example of a few bad actors in this space. I do think EPAs have a role to play in ensuring that what people believe they are getting is what they are. But I also think the consumer has a role to play in asking the questions. You can't just keep rolling over and going back to sleep thinking that you're doing the right thing. So I think that the consumer must keep asking the most important question you're ever taught or should be ever taught at school, which is why. Why? Why does that happen? Why? If I give this to you, what are you going to do with it? And I think the consumer has a really strong role to say in challenging and knowing that they have the regulatory authority or framework to challenge brands who are saying the wrong thing. I mean, some of the claims we see about textile performance and textiles recyclability, it is flat out scientific rubbish. But the consumer needs to take that to the ACCC. The consumer needs to take that to trading standards, needs to take that to... The consumer has a role to play here. I would encourage people is to, without us all becoming sick, without us all becoming sort of living constantly with rage, but we need to get angrier about this. We need to understand that at times things are being said which are not true.
Do we need also more of a guidance of what exactly is recycling? Like a real definition and real getting down to that scientific explanation level so people can understand what is fully compostable or semi-compostable or what's recyclable or, in your experience, Mandy.
Well, it's an interesting point because I think particularly maybe about 5 or so years ago at Elk, everything was so new. We were pushing into areas where people didn't know where to find recycled or compostable or elastic or whatever it might be, a trim or fabrication. So there was a need to try and find a body or someone who is happy to put definitions on those things. I suppose if you spin it the other way around, and the good thing is that sustainability as a broader thing has infiltrated all of our lives on lots of different levels. Like we all now understand how to recycle at home, and we all understand at least in a limited way the impact on what we do when we go shopping for things. So I think from our perspective as a small business, what we do is educate. So we are as transparent as we possibly can. We release all our information. We have on our website through our transparency report. We talk often with our customers about what we're trying to do, because that language that they learn from us, they can then go and ask the next business. So you come out of an Elk store, you've been handed a paper bag rather than a plastic bag, a fully recycled bag, whatever the impact is we've had on you, then you take that to the next store and you ask, like you were suggesting, you ask the question, why are you still giving me a plastic bag? And why does this plastic bag say, take me home and recycle me? It's like, well, that doesn't matter. How many plastic bags can you actually use again and again? So that whole idea of one person tells something. It might seem maybe an old-fashioned approach, but sometimes that education piece is the way to go. But it's not just us that needs to educate. The education needs to be at a higher level.
Look, the education piece, I really, and I know when we're judging our awards, and even the discussion I have with judges when we're judging different entries, the argument between experts saying, what is the best way? Is this... We're still learning. We're still learning, and we still need more proof. We need more examples. We need more insight into, if I take a paper bag and I'm only using it once and I throw it away, is it better than using a plastic bag 40, 50 times? I mean, it's those sorts of anecdotal discussions that we need to have, and what is the best way?
And I think that innovation piece is interesting because through innovation sometimes you also fail. And so I think that funding needs to be there with an open-ended look to say, well, you're working on the edge of something. 90% of it might work or 60% of it might work, but at least we've stepped forward and tried something different. But you're right, it's a never-ending problem that we're trying to solve here. It doesn't have an end. So it's choices between good and slightly good, bad and better. Like, you know, and we tend to use the language of we're just trying to, keep improving.
Well, and I think we're all on that journey too. And because it's such an evolving industry around waste resources. I've learned something today. But I think it is that evolving journey that, all of a sudden you think you're doing something really well and then you find out, this is the wrong way of doing it, or they've discovered something else, or there is a better way, or there's a new process that someone's invented. So I think we've got to be hard on ourselves, but we can't be too hard because it is continual learning, as you say, Mandy.
But also it's not taking a maximalist view as you go through there, because I think, to your earlier point, Graz, which I think is really important, there needs to be definitions and standards as to what things are. We're Blocktex is a member of ACOR, and ACOR is working very hard at the moment to establish standards of what is a recycler. And I think that's really important, because then you can actually start to audit those that claim to be a recycler. And if they are, fantastic. Have your badge. You're now accredited. And that accreditation gives you benefits in government procurement or something. Discuss. If you're not, here's the things you have to do. Because you'll only ever capture the people who actually want to be good, because the bad actors are never going to be audited. They will always stay in the dark, undercover, out of the way. But what I would say is that this journey's Blocktex has really taught me one thing, is that there is no one answer, in the sense that, we hear people say, the best way to deal with polyester is to ban polyester. And then you say, there should be no plastic in the world. And then you think, well, you might want to rethink that conversation, because plastic actually does have a use. It's what we do at the end of the plastic's life that is the most important question. I don't know whether we ban plastics. Well, we can't. They're out there. They're in us. They're in the fish. They're in the... Too late. It's what we choose to do at the end of that life. And I sometimes think these maximalist views I read all the time, that we should all be cotton, or we should all be this, or we should all... It's like I'm old enough to remember when the internet was came out in the late 90s. That was the end of shopping centres, apparently. Well, I think Westfield did pretty well in the last 25 years. So I think, because we also failed to forget that in that the whole discussion around we'll all be buying everything online, humans like to be with humans. And so we still like to tribe. And so yes or no is often not the right answer. It's kind of a maybe.
And I think that's really good. I love the fact that it could be a maybe, because it's not black and white, and there's all those degrees in between. I'm going to sort of jump on to role of government.
My favourite subject.
Yeah. Look, the federal government has introduced product stewardship and extended producer responsibility schemes in sectors like packaging. But textiles are still in the early stages. At the same time, procurement, especially government procurement, could be a powerful lever to preference Australia recycled content. Yes, is it, though, underutilised, or do you think that there could be more of a push there, Adrian?
Well, I think this is this is several PhD papers all at once here. I think that the role of government in this space is enormous. Government, just by their nature, are one of the largest procurers of stuff of any kind in an economy. It doesn't mean we should have a planned economy where they are the only procurer of stuff, but they need to be they need to play a really important role in both pump priming, in terms of being the person who buys the Australian-made recycled materials, because they need to encourage in their contracts that private contractors who are working on government contracts have to preference Australian-made recycled materials. At the moment, Commonwealth contracts say your contract will be treated better if you contain recycled material. Well, London to a brick, it is cheaper to buy recycled plastic made in Asia than to buy recycled plastic made in Dandenong because just of the labour rates. It's the same chemical, it's the same product, but it will be cheaper to do that. So unless the government contracts say Australian-made recycled content, contractors have an opportunity to say, well, I've got recycled content, I just bought the cheapest one. I didn't buy Australian one.
Is there any appetite from the government going down that road?
Well, here we go. I think there should be, but when we've raised this commentary with the federal government and with some state governments, their concern has been we might be in breach of our World Trade Organization legislation, which I would think, given what's happened in the last 6 to 9 months of tariffs on, I think the World Trade Organization is kind of really suffering a credibility gap at the moment. I think Australia needs to, when it's looking at protecting its environment, protecting its growing industries, it needs to say government procurement needs to be a massive part in pump priming, whether it's textile recycling, whether it's tyre recycling, whether it's metal recycling. There are contracts there that should favour and should use Australian recycled materials. And that's what governments can do. And they need to be thinking more about innovation and generating industrial growth than worrying about what the lawyers might say and risk management. And there's always a balance, there's always a maybe. And I'm not saying we completely ignore our international legal obligations. I'm not saying that at all. But I think we need to be a little bit more focused on how we grow the recycling industry in Australia.
Red light, we pause unsure. Green light, we run, but what for? In trade, each move feels like a bet. One wrong turn, you're not there yet. But then a door opens, a voice cuts through. Not competition, but something new. We learn, we lead, we trade with speed. Not just to win, but to grow what we need. Smarter together, bold under pressure. This is the game and we play it better.
Regulatory complexity. Can we get onto that one?
This is proving to be a fun day, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just pulling all the information out of you, Adrian. Look, Australia's regulatory landscape, it's a little bit fragmented. Each of the state EPAs having their different rules, requirements. It's a bit of a patchwork of rules that I would assume would add costs, time, in how you would deal with the different states. Do you want to sort of give us a bit of an insight into that?
With pleasure. I mean, I think the last 5 years of navigating this journey of multiple state EPAs, environmental protection agencies, overlaid with federal government as well, it's highlighted the fact that federation, the Act of Federation, was possibly useful in 1901, but the regulations have not kept up with a modern, dynamic, complex economy. Minister Watt's intention to establish a national EPA, initially I was sceptical of this. Now I'm 100% supportive, because the differences in definitions across even across Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria means a product can be a product in one state, a waste in another, a product in another state, can be applied in this state, can't be applied in that state. And then you have in certain jurisdictions innovation and risk in the same building. In other jurisdictions, innovation and risk live in other buildings but don't always talk to each other. But what always happens in government is that risk always wins. It's easier to say no and no one get hurt than say yes and somebody go outside the cave. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in sort of one enormous episode of The Croods in which no one ever leaves the cave in case we get hurt. And at some point in an innovation landscape, you have to leave the cave. In a controlled environment, I think the environmental area, the recycling area, must be a well-regulated environment, but it can't be an environment in which risk is always the dominant gene. So I think that a national EPA with national standards of what products are, what resources are, even a national definition of what waste is, would be really, really, really useful, because the cost of doing business is astronomical. Blocktex alone has spent over $100,000 on legal advice of definitions in each state's waste act. It's preposterous.
You need a good AI for that. One of the final things I want to talk about, and Mandy, you'd probably started with this conversation, is behaviour change, carrots and sticks. How do we shift behaviour, but at scale? Because it's we see pockets of it happening, but what is the education, the awareness that we need to be doing as an industry, working together to be able to change that whole behavioural thinking of how we perceive fashion or textiles or purchasing of fashion?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm not sure I can answer it that well. Needless to say, I think the carrot and stick piece is tricky. From a fashion point of view, you can differentiate obviously on your designs, that's first, and the aesthetic appeal of your beautiful product. But next, it's price or something else you're differentiating on. So we differentiate on sustainable, preferred materials, doing the right thing. That can never be a stick. That has to be a carrot. So, and I think the whole fashion industry is on carrots. Like, it's very easy to get up in the morning and wear the same garment for a week, but none of us do, because it's a emotional connection that we have, and it's part of who we deliver to the world. You do, okay, right? Some work to do there, Graz.
Yeah,
exactly. That's another whole podcast.
Einstein wore the same outfit every day.
Look at his hair. Yeah, he needed a comb. So I think then it has to become part of the vernacular and the conversation. So our wonderful marketing team always makes sure that answering the why should you buy this garment? Well, this garment has these preferred fibres. It's been made in a factory that's been audited. We know our scope 1s, 2 and sometimes 3. All of that why is part of the carrot, and saying this is why people should buy. It's more considered or conscious purchasing. Our tagline is conscious fashion, to make people walk into our stores or visit our website or wander into one of our beautiful stockist stores and understand I'm making a conscious decision here. That's hard. That's a carrot. The stick can come in from a regulatory point of view to make sure that we're on a level playing field, because that's what we aren't on. We aren't on a level playing field. So until that piece, that is the stick that needs to come in. But all of fashion, I think, is a carrot.
Adrian.
I'm going to sort of bring this up a bit higher level, because I think it's actually a really important policy question. I think that if you think about how an EPR scheme works, it's actually trying to capture the external price of a product, which isn't borne by the person who sells that product, and put that price back into it. So everyone understands that if there's a pollution cost, that's an external cost, but that's then brought back into the internal price of the garment through an EPR scheme, through a levy raise on the price of that garment. I think EPR schemes are incredibly important, but they have to be constructed in the right way. I think a lot of EPR schemes in Australia are constructed with a brand focus. So they're actually a marketing exercise. They actually make the brands look good, because the brands say, oh, no, we've got an EPR scheme, but they don't involve the collectors, the sorters, the recyclers. And I think unless you've got that end-to-end governance model, your EPR scheme is destined to fail. I also think EPR schemes need to have real teeth. So they actually need to be able to impose a price on a product coming into market that is actually reflecting the true cost of moving that product all the way through the value chain to recyclability. There's the old expression, you can never out-train a bad diet. And it's like, we can never recycle ourselves out of overconsumption. And I said, unless we actually increase the price of the product so people buy less, ultimately, of a higher quality, we are never going to solve the problem. We will see the downward spiral we've seen over the last 10, 15 years. Average price of clothing is going down because people just want to have more, but of lower quality, which is harder and harder and harder to recycle. So I think EPR schemes are really important because they do provide a stick, because they say the price point of the garment has now changed. So I can now afford to buy less of those garments, but the garment I am buying is of a higher quality. And I think that is really important for an EPR scheme. I think there are, and I would encourage EPR schemes that are evolving in Australia to really think about their pricing onto market. Because unless it is of a level that actually drives a change in that price point, all you're going to do is impose a cost somewhere in the supply chain, but it won't be bought. It won't change the behaviour. It won't be the stick you want it to be. I then think the carrot, the really important carrot, is educating people, really educating people. And from tomorrow's consumers, we do a lot of work with one of our clients, is a big schoolwear supplier, and we are working through a program about how we educate tomorrow's consumer about today's consumption by using their schoolwear as an example of recyclability. And I think you have to start off at the very start of their consumption journey, and start off with helping them understand what it means if you don't. I think we have to have those honest conversations about the impact of our clothing, because we don't. We put something into an envelope or something into a satchel and we post it to somewhere and say, hey, I'm recycling. You don't know what happens to it. You have no idea where it goes. And it's really important that you do ask, where's it gone? But I think then the onus on those businesses is to educate people. And I think some of the funds raised in EPR schemes can be used for that education. So I think at a macro level, Block takes 110% supports EPR schemes, but they have to be priced accurately and they have to include all players in there to drive a pool of money that can then be used to continue to fund better design and better education.
And I think also, when you talk to Gen Z, and they're concerned about climate change, they're concerned about the big things, but they'll use the Uber Eats to, go and get their foods, or they're on their phone all the time, or they're using AI. If they only knew how much energy they were, utilising. It's those practical things that we're not teaching
The
people.
two biggest things we can do in the world now, if we all really cared about the planet, take a plant-based diet and stop flying. Do that tomorrow, and we've got. and I'm not having a crack at the meat industry or the aviations, but those are the two biggest things. Anybody has a personal choice and agency over tomorrow. We could stop eating meat tomorrow. We could stop flying tomorrow. That would have a huge impact. What I do see in the Gen Zs, I do see there's a far greater understanding of the problem that they face. There's an anger and a concern about what world, the report out this week, 3 degrees heating in Australia does not look pleasant. It does not look pleasant at all. So you are seeing more of those people coming into the reuse sector. You are seeing more of the people actually, the idea of thrift is no longer something you do because you have to. It's something you do because you want to, and that's a positive education change. And I encourage it. This jacket I'm wearing today is probably 27 years old, and it was a good jacket, and I bought it, and it still it doesn't quite button up anymore. But that's another reason. But that's another problem. That's why maybe I should adopt the plant-based diet. But I do think that I see very positive signs of behavioural change, but we have to make some big changes. Stop eating meat, stop flying. That will actually drive significant change. And good legislation around, I really want to see more EPR schemes with real teeth. But you can't beat a person until they smile. They have to want to go on the journey.
Exactly. It's there's got to be the carrot. It's got to be the enticement. It's got to be, you know, with fashion, it makes me feel good. I don't have to buy 10 pairs of something, but as long as I buy one really good pair that makes me feel good and, you know, it expresses me. And I think we need to, I remember when I was at school, we learnt about style and, you know, what constitutes style and how do you do that. It's not just, you just purchase for the sake of purchasing, and you just might find one thing out there that makes you feel good out of all those things.
I was horrified that, and again, I don't have any social media apart from LinkedIn, which I don't use that. But I was amazed, and I was doing some research into fast fashion and the drivers of the consumption and why it's so volumetric. And one thing it hadn't even occurred to my sort of 59-year-old brain was that people don't want to be seen in the same Instagram photograph in the same outfit twice. I was like, wow. But
does anyone notice though?
I mean, I don't know, but I was just amazed by that. One of the drivers of this is that I can't be seen twice in the same outfit. But that blew me away. It's like I hadn't thought about that because I've got certain amount of clothes in my wardrobe, and I might wear the red pants with the grey jacket, or maybe I'll wear the blue jacket with the. But
Adrian, that's from a male perspective. I think us females might find it a little bit differently.
Yeah, but it was just that I can't be seen in the same Instagram photograph. And I thought that is pretty shallow.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting there is technology is going to fix that because you'll just create your avatar.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. It's just been fascinating. Can you leave one thought of how you would see in your industry one substantive change that you would like to see, something to change that you think would make a huge difference?
I would like to see people buy less clothing of a much higher quality. That stayed in reuse for longer, and by the time we got it, it really could only be recycled.
Mandy?
I'd like to see that as well, of course, but also regulation. I think we are only a small business from our perspective. We hard hit in this sustainable space, but we can't have the impact that is required. So regulation would have that impact.
Okay. Question 2. And thank you again for being with us here today. I've really enjoyed the discussion. What's one thing, just to leave the audience, what's one thing that you would have changed over the last 10 years and something that you would have done?
That's a really good question. And if I had my time again, and Graham and I, my business partner, and I do discuss this a lot, if I had my time again, we would have gone even faster than we had. We would have raised more money and gone even faster than we had. I think because it was so groundbreaking what we were doing, we probably got concerned we were getting too far ahead. I wish we'd just ran faster.
Mandy, your thoughts?
I think education, if there was an avenue to allow the broader consumer to understand how to shop consciously, then I think that would be a really huge benefit for the industry, full stop.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us for this section of our discussion with Blocktex and with Elk. Thank you very much, Mandy. Thank you very much, Adrian.